Hi, welcome to the NASEP, the Native American Science and Engineering workshop. Today we have a guest speaker. Her name is Miss Paula Johnson. She works at the University of Arizona Engineering Science Library. Am I correct in that? And she'll be speaking to us about how to do research using the different components of the library systems to help us in our research. And we will be just listening to her presentation for the next 45 minutes or so. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat and someone will read them, or raise your hand so we can call on you. And with that, Carol, have I missed anything?
No, just the doodle poll. So the doodle poll out with a new suggested times for when we can have the workshops to make sure that we're getting people at times that they're available. So if you haven't filled that out yet, I can send the link again to make sure that you receive that so we can get that settled. But I think that's it, Natalia. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to turn the time over to Miss Paula Johnson, and you should have access to the you should have the co-host access.
Great, thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Natalia, and thank you, Carol. Really nice to be here. Yeah, I'm the librarian here at University of Arizona for the subject areas that cover engineering and some of the science topics. We have librarians that cover different subjects, but any of us are always eager to help students, and that includes students within the community. And I heard we have some out-of-staters, and that's wonderful too. Welcome. I lived in New Mexico for 9 years. I loved it down in Las Cruces, and moved to Tucson to work at this library. But anyway, I'm glad you're here to go over with me some of the different ways that you can conduct research on projects that you'll be working on or working on already. I'm going to share with you a URL to an online guide that I'm going to work off of to do this workshop. This guide will be there 24/7, so whenever you want to refer to it, it's going to be here with links throughout the guide that might be useful to you. I'll just go ahead and see if I can share my screen so you can see this URL. Okay, so this is the LibGuide URL. It's kind of long, but hopefully we'll send this out through the same email that the link to this session is done, so people can follow along and look at the guide as I use it. So there's the URL, and now I'm going to go to the guide. Okay, so this is the guide. And I started out on the homepage just covering the fact that there are many really in-depth scholarly sources that would be available to you if you were on the UA campus within the IP range or in either of the library buildings. On campus, we have a main library and a science and engineering library, and that just kind of dates from the time period when everything was in print, and it was a simple way to organize contents where you had all your humanities and literature and art and all those kind of subjects in one building for those students that were doing those kind of majors. And then we had the science, technology, and engineering stuff in another building. Now, of course, a lot of the resources are digital, so it doesn't really matter where you're physically going to be, but we still have those two separate buildings on campus. And any of you are always welcome to come use the library. We have computers that are specifically designated for community users, which means you don't have to have a UA login and password to use the computers or to use the databases or any of the contents that the library has. But the fact is, most of you aren't going to be able to be on campus for a while. So in this guide, I've included some links to freely available resources. So these would be things that you can access without having any sort of credentials. Just to review, if you aren't familiar with library databases, they're commercial products that libraries or states or companies sometimes will purchase access. Usually the license is on an annual basis. So every year, for example, the library will subscribe to, in UA's case, over 100 different databases to provide contents for researchers. And databases are convenient because they bundle together hundreds of thousands of journal articles, conference proceedings, magazine articles. Sometimes there's sound files, newspaper articles, all kinds of contents related to different subjects. And many databases have a focus, like we have a handful of databases where the focus is specifically on engineering topics. And then there are multidisciplinary databases, and those databases cover things from medicine to filmmaking to, everything under the sun. And in a lot of subjects that you're going to be pursuing, multidisciplinary works. When you're doing a GIS project, maybe you're doing something to do with public health, but also looking at economic and socioeconomic factors. So a database that covered just public health might not be sufficient for your purposes. So anyway, on this guide's homepage, I included a little diagram that's kind of a visual way of understanding the research process when you're doing research in the sciences or engineering. It starts out by defining your problem. So sometimes you'll formulate your thesis or your problem in the form of a question, like what is the best design for a solar oven? That might be something that you pursue, a research problem that you're interested in examining. And then you start doing the background research. And that's where these journal articles, magazine articles, and other kinds of digital or print resources can help you out. Another kind of contents that's helpful for background research are items that are referred to as reference materials. And maybe back in elementary school, you remember your teacher showed you encyclopedias or handbooks, things that gave you kind of a background. And today, a lot of times when people have a subject that they're not that familiar with, that they want to get kind of a good foundation before they start their research, where do we often go? Wikipedia. It's an online encyclopedia. And it's a little bit, it's not entirely 100% the best place to go for background information. But over the years, people that contribute to Wikipedia, it's pretty well edited. Many of the pages have a very strong community of editors that ensure that mistakes are rapidly corrected and that also provide references so that anything that you're reading within the article that is a statement of fact will have a link to where that is found, you know, so that I don't tell people not to use Wikipedia. And I think a lot of teachers no longer say that Wikipedia is off limits because of the fact that it does often have very well footnoted and referenced contents. So anyway, background information can be found in reference materials, be it a handbook, you know, like, for example, if you were doing something that involved an equation of some sort, having a handbook that gave you an equation for calculating calories, you know, in a chemical reaction or something like that. That kind of a handbook would be very helpful for getting that background information. But background research can also be looking at articles that have explored your topic. So that's where the literature research is likely to come in. Then you kind of specify your requirements. What am I going to need to conduct this experiment or to set up this research project? And then you start brainstorming and you come up with a variety of solutions, and you try one out, you test it, and use that as a prototype. And on the basis of your results, if you are successful in coming up with a solution for your original question, you might go with that. If it doesn't get you to the place of feeling like you've got a successful solution, you reevaluate, brainstorm some more, and try a different solution. So in science, and it's the same in doing literature searching, your original strategy might not be successful. That's not a problem, because even if it's not successful, you're one step closer to getting to the successful solution. I think it was Thomas Edison who said something about, I'm never disappointed when my invention doesn't work out, because it means I've taken a step closer to you know, a successful invention. So anyway, after you tested your solution and it does work, then you can go ahead and communicate your results. And I know in NASEP, you know, and in science fairs, the format for communicating your results is often a research poster. So the research poster is something I'll look at too with y'all. And a scientific poster will often have, just like a scientific paper, it will often have references. So when you've got some text explaining, you know, your hypothesis and your solution and your results, I mean, your method, your results, all of that kind of contents that you'll likely include in your research poster, you're also possibly going to be having references to where you got bits of information. And those references are like the citations. And I'll hold off on talking about citations, but right now I just wanted to give you the kind of big picture of the research project, the methodology here in terms of you develop your project, you develop a methodology, a hypothesis, you test it out, and so forth. So apart from this diagram, I've also included on the homepage some tutorials. They're really brief, they're self-paced, and they give you information that you can stop. And if you're not understanding something, you can go back to the beginning of the tutorial and look at that section again. But the topics are all relevant for scholarly research. And the first topic included is popular versus scholarly sources. And in the high school level, you're starting to kind of get your feet wet in terms of scholarly research. And that means that occasionally your teacher may ask you to only use so-called scholarly sources. Other names for this would be academic sources, or sometimes people refer to these as peer-reviewed sources. And there is a pretty big difference between a scholarly source and a popular source. And it has to do with how extensively the contents has been reviewed for accuracy and authority. So like a popular source would be a magazine article, like something in Newsweek magazine would be a popular source. Or I'm trying to think of other magazines. The kind of thing you might find at a barber shop, you know, a Sports Illustrated or mechanics, popular mechanics, or something you'd find in the dentist office, or, you know, those kinds of magazines, People magazine and so forth. Those would be popular sources. And the articles in a popular source are sometimes the editor of the magazine will reach out and ask a magazine writer to cover a topic. Oh, we need an article on the 2021 TV season. You know, would you write us an article that talks about the best new shows of 2021? You know, or, you know, about Adele, you know, or, you know, they'll ask for articles. Or there might be a writer out there, freelancer, who writes an article on their trip to Hawaii and submits it to an article, a magazine, and it gets published. So there isn't a lot of review. They will have sometimes fact checkers look at the article to make sure there aren't any blatant errors, you know, so the phone number is correct or whatever in that magazine article. Okay, so that's not a whole lot of review for publication. Contrast that to a scholarly journal article where the system is quite different. You have a journal editor, a scholarly journal editor, who receives articles from researchers. And researchers are very interested in getting their research published. To have your research published in an academic journal is a stamp of approval. It often is used to make decisions about whether you as a researcher are hired, you know, or kept on. Publication is a way of proving your importance and impact. And so people who publish a lot are often viewed very favorably by the people in their field. And then the other reason that researchers like to publish is that they're building on the knowledge base of a particular field. So, you know, people who have been doing research in COVID, they're publishing as quickly as they can, so they can share their information, their discoveries and their important information with other people in the field that can build on it, that don't have to duplicate all the research that was done by that researcher. They can build on it. And that way, science is advanced. And that's how discoveries happen. You know, somebody makes a discovery, they publish their results, somebody takes that information and they take it a step further and they publish their results, and it just keeps building and building and building. And so it's really important. Publication is really important. And because other researchers are building on this research, it's critical that there be no errors, that everything that's presented has been carefully vetted for accuracy and authority. So a journal editor for a scholarly journal gets, hundreds of journal articles submitted to them for review and possible publication. That journal editor has a large number of people that have agreed to be peer reviewers. So that means that if you're publishing in mining engineering and you're sending your article to a journal of mining engineering, that editor knows a lot of people that work in the field of mining engineering that have agreed to review articles for them. And so they'll send out these articles to these various peer reviewers. And those peer reviewers look at the article and go through it with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that there are no mistakes, that everything's been clearly presented, that all the tables and graphs and all the information within the article are free of mistakes. Sometimes the reviewer will see things that maybe aren't completely wrong, but they should be made clearer, or the table should, has a mistake in the labeling or something like that. And what they'll do is they will send the article back to the editor and say, I would recommend publication of this pending corrections or revisions, and they'll outline what they think needs to be changed. And then the editor sends it back to the original author with the comments. The original author makes the changes, sends it back to the editor, who sends it out to another reviewer. And once more, it gets looked at very carefully for any mistakes. Usually at that point, if the corrections have been made, the second reviewer says, fine, good, publish it. And it gets published. But that's very different than like a magazine article. And so for that reason, sometimes when you're doing scientific research, your teacher may request that you only use scholarly sources in your own literature review. Other tutorials, apart from the scholarly and popular sources tutorial, how do I create a search strategy? There are various techniques and tricks for, getting a fine-tuned search strategy. How do I evaluate online information? That can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes you're on a website and there aren't any references that show you that, the information contained in the website has been, referenced to authoritative sources, or it's a .com website. And I think all of us know that .com is a commercial website. Doesn't mean that the information is no good, but it can mean it can be biased, and therefore, not very good to use. So sometimes .org is not always reliable either. .gov websites generally do have factual information that you can rely upon as being authoritative. But anyway, this tutorial will help you learn how to evaluate online information for its usefulness. And then how do I give credit to others? It can be real tricky sometimes to know how to paraphrase contents. And even if you paraphrase contents, you still need to give credit to the source where you got that idea from. So this tutorial helps you learn how to do that. And just for a bonus, I did throw in a link to the American Indian Studies guide, which is just like this guide. It's an online guide that our American Indian Studies librarian created because there is a minor in American Indian Studies for undergraduates. And he included a bunch of sources that are freely available that you might be curious to explore. I just thought it might be fun to add that in there. Okay, so let's go to the databases that the state of Arizona has provided. I'm sorry for you out-of-state people. You're free to use the University of Arizona zip code to access these resources because you are affiliated with NASEP, which is the University of Arizona program. So that would be 85721. That's all that the state asks you to enter to access these databases is an Arizona zip code. So they have 3 databases. One is called Academic One File, General One File, and Science in Context. So I'll just look at one of these databases, and they're all pretty much the same in terms of their interface. So let's look at the first one here, Academic One File. So I'll just enter the University of Arizona zip code and log in. So most databases start out with a single search box because everyone's so used to Google, which has a single search box. The advanced search box, in contrast, lets you combine different fields. So I'll just do that for now. Would either of the 2 students that are, or I guess there's more than 2 students now, would anyone want to unmute themselves and suggest a topic, maybe one that you're actually researching right now?
This is a good opportunity to start searching for your geoscience if you're doing water, air, or sustainability, and you're having a hard time looking up the information. This is a great opportunity to put your research or search your research topic.
Let's see. Cole, do you mind providing a topic, please? And what's fun about this exercise is the process will help you find. Okay, so he put water quality.
Okay. All right, water quality. And just like Google, it has a lot of suggested, search terms, but we'll just go with the basic water quality. Would there be a secondary term to kind of help us refine it, or should we just see how many results we get with water? Let's do that. We'll start out with water quality, see how many results we get, and then we can refine it if we want to narrow it down. So it's showing that from academic journals, we're getting a little over 7,500 results. And excuse me. And right now the sorting is by relevance. If we were interested, we could see the newest results at the top of our list. So you're probably looking at February 2022 and wondering, how does that happen? Well, when a journal has already fulfilled all of its, I don't know a better word than slots, like this particular journal probably back when it was in print only had a page number limit for each journal. And then so 12 journals, if they publish monthly, times 200 page limit, they only had 2,400 pages per year. So they do start accepting things for the following year when they filled their number of pages for 2021. So they're already accepting things for 2022. And that's why this article shows that it's in the 2022 issue for February. That's probably as far as they've gone. They're only into the second month of 2022. But yeah, so right now, because of everything being digital, we can actually access things that won't be officially published until 2022. Back in the days of print, they would hold these in a file and it wouldn't be actually printed in the hard copy until February 2022. But at any rate, so there's just a lot of articles here, and here's an article about, it looks like a generally a general research article, suitability of reclaimed wastewater effluent from decentralized water plant for irrigation. So it's exploring the usefulness of using wastewater for irrigation. And you can imagine, that would be of great interest because of the water shortage. It would be a wonderful thing if we could find a way to use wastewater for irrigation that wouldn't be toxic to what's growing there. So anyway, so this would be a scholarly article, and it gives you the citation information, and it gives you the full text. And like most scholarly articles, it has different tables, and it may have graphs, that kind of thing. A lot of data. And for citing, a lot of the databases have a citation tool where if you click on the cite tool, it will show you the format. So this would be, can't quite get this out of the way. Oh, here we go. It's showing you the most common citation formats. And if you were instructed to use APA, which is probably more common in science than MLA, you would hit the APA, copy and paste that into your document or your poster. It's a nice little, bonus that you can get using a database, is that citation tool. So if we wanted to edit our search,
Well, Paula, there was one recommendation to add chlorine to water quality.
Great, let's do that. So that brought it down to a much more manageable set of results. Instead of 7,500 results, now we've got 119 academic journal articles, 31 magazine articles, and 300 some newspaper articles. So again, if you're not required to use academic journal articles, magazine articles are, when it's on a scientific topic like this, magazine articles can sometimes be easier to comprehend reading level, especially, I'm thinking of high school reading level. But anyway, some of the stuff though is not going to be useful, like product news. That's a magazine article that you wouldn't want to use in a research paper. But in academic journals, sure, you can start looking at what's included and see if there's anything that's going to be helpful in your research project. So one of the things, okay, so say this was an article that, well, that's a book review, it looks like. Well, reduce chlorine and distribution. Okay. What's this? Drinking water. Okay, so this is looking at different different levels of chlorine and water quality and what kind of an impact that makes. Just for example, say that this was an article that was, let's see here. Just trying to find one that would be better. Let's see. So
Paula, some of the students are using a water quality test kit that tests for chlorine, lead, nitrite, nitrates, bacteria, um, what else? Lead. So they're using this one kit to be able to tell them how what they want to learn from their geoscience project. So chlorine was one of those tests that they were using.
Okay. Well, so the question is effectiveness of the chlorine test kit, or I'm trying to understand what.
Well, I just wanted to give you an background on what geosciences that they're using, and it's water, air, or sustainability. And so one of the students had picked chlorine in their drinking water at school, testing it at school, at home, and another place. So the question was, I mean, it wasn't really a question, it's more of a comment.
Okay. Well, sure. It looked like, and it looked like that is a topic that you would find some articles on, using chlorine in water. So, but yeah, so you would have to go through the articles to see if they had relevance to your specific project. So I think my main point with this is showing you that you can search these databases. I don't want to take a lot of time specifically getting an article for this particular student, because I want to cover some other things, if that's okay. But one of the things I wanted to say, that if you find an article that's helpful, if you find a useful article, and you sometimes have to dig deep. If you find a useful article, one of the things to know about journal articles is that they have references, and there is that concept that a friend of a friend is a friend. So if you were to find a very helpful scholarly article, if you look at the references in that article and track down the references, it's likely that those articles would also be helpful to you. So that's just one. They call it citation chaining. Sometimes that's how people refer to it. You use the references that are in a good article to find other articles that are good. So you could go to the references in this article and search for that article and try and track that article down and so forth. That's just a kind of thing about scholarly research, is that references of good articles can be good directional tips as far as other good articles. So these are the databases the state of Arizona provides. There is also something called the National Science Digital Library. This is a really nice resource because it has links. About 60% of the contents in here is open access, and you can sort it according to high school level. So if you were doing water purification, you could say, I'm interested in high school level contents on this particular topic, and do your search. And it has a real focused set of different resources. So most of it is stuff where it's educational. So it might not exactly be a source that you could cite, but it's a source that's going to give you some really good understanding of your topic. So these resources, again, as far as background information, these can be super helpful to give you some free educational background. And then, of course, we've got Google and Google Scholar. Google Scholar would be where the content is scholarly. Google, just plain Google, will have a mix. So it's got a lot of popular sources in there. And if you're not required to use scholarly sources, by all means, Google is a good place to do some searching. Google Scholar would be the place to go if the request was that you used scholarly sources. And Google Scholar will have links to, if there happens to be a PDF available of the article that is included in your results, you'll have a link to get that full text PDF in Google Scholar. Tutorials exist for both of these, and I included links here. And then I think it's based in Europe, but there is a academic search engine, which, like this Google and Google Scholar are two search engines. There's one called BASE, and it is a search engine that's focused on scientific and academic web resources. And again, it has a lot of open access content. And open access is the term that people use. Sometimes they just call it OA. They use it to refer to contents that's not behind a paywall. So I mentioned that these database services are commercial products, and unless you have unless you've been given access through your affiliation, say with a university or company, or in this state, you're affiliated with the state of Arizona, so you've got access to those 3 databases, there's going to be a paywall. And you'll hit it pretty quickly in Google, for example. When you click a link to an article, sometimes it will pop up, $30 to access this article, and that's a little bit frustrating. Nobody that I know can pay $30 to have access to an article, especially if they're doing research where they might want 10 or 12 articles to do their literature review. So open access is a thing, a movement that kind of started about 10 years ago, and trying to make content freely available to anyone, anywhere in the world. So sometimes journals will make their content open access. Sometimes an author will pay extra to have their content be open access. And this search engine links to a lot of open access content. So I just wanted to include a link to that search engine. It's not as well known as Google and Google Scholar. So books and reference materials. There's a search engine for books, and it's the directory of open access books. So the contents here is freely available to you. And if I wanted to find a book on water quality, do a search. It shows me that there are these different books that are available for use. And, there's even a book on research and practices in water quality. So books can be equally helpful in academic research. It's not just journal articles, although, journal articles is usually the way people go when they want to publish their research. Books can be very helpful in getting good content for your research. And then there's a bunch of different digital libraries that have to do with the sciences that I've included links to these different sources. These are less well developed than the DOAB is, but they may have some content that would be helpful. So I included those GIS, I did want to include the information that our library includes about GIS. You probably already knew all this stuff, but I included this GIS information because this is what the library offers researchers, and it has these links that can be helpful to people doing GIS research. And then I did include links to a couple groups in Arizona. I think out-of-state people, because you're affiliated with the University of Arizona, can use these groups. But if GIS turns out to be something that you get kind of excited about, there's a group for women in GIS that's in the state, and there's also a group for just people within the state that are interested in GIS, and they have different workshops, and you know, they have different ways of providing support for people doing GIS projects. So I just thought I'd include links to those two groups. Patents is another type of literature in the sciences that can be interesting. I've included a lot of information about patents, but it's not something that you would likely explore at this point in your research. But what's fun about patents is that they often have diagrams. So if you were developing, say, a water filtration unit, you know, for a handheld something, you know, a very simple water filter for people living in a rural area that temporarily needed to filter their own water, say their water line was busted, or I don't know, you know, you could like look up water filtration device, you know, a field water filtration device, and see some diagrams of devices that have been created by inventors. And those diagrams are sometimes great ways to sort of stimulate your own design ideas. Technical reports and technical standards are two types of scientific literature that people can use for advancing their own research. Technical reports are issued by government agencies and laboratories, and they're not the kind of research that you'd find in an academic journal or a magazine. They're a little bit different. And for example, like in science.gov, that's a search engine for technical reports. And if I did something like, let's say I was interested in Arizona water. Arizona water. It shows different clusters. So it shows how these have been broken out into different reports and different authors. There's our representative rather, has done a number of reports on the water situation, and it breaks it down into different topics. What if I was interested in reports on Arizona Indian Affairs? What kind of reports have been issued here? It's going through all the different technical reports, and it comes up with different agencies. So if I wanted to look at those issued by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and if I wanted to sort these out by, let's see, yeah, I could choose a date range if I wanted to make them more recent, but here it's just showing different annual reports. But I could start exploring these, and yeah, so wanted only the most recent. it shows you the different kinds of things that have been published recently. There was a report, I'm not seeing it in this set of results, that I thought was really interesting, that talked about, it was just a 2021 report too, that was talking about repatriation of objects in various museums and libraries and so forth, that was underway. So I don't want to take a whole lot more of your time. I did want to really quick show you that we have a tutorial, a demonstration of 3 of the maker tools. At the University of Arizona campus, there is a large area called the Catalyst Studios. It includes a maker space, it includes a data visualization studio, it includes an artificial and virtual reality studio, and all of these are open to the public. So if any student is interested in, in the springtime, possibly having a field trip or an individual tour, talk to one of your teachers about setting that up. And we'd be absolutely thrilled to let you come in and use the space. There's support for 3D printing. You do pay for the filament, but it's at cost. There's vinyl cutters, laser cutters, and the video that I've included here in the guide shows you how these 3 tools are used and operate. And then finally, I think that you probably get this already, but there's a kind of step-by-step procedure for using PowerPoint to do a research poster. How to use PowerPoint to lay out a large poster is helpful. And there's a good poster design checklist I've included too. Acknowledging sources. I mentioned that using references and citing your sources is really important. And I pointed out that we do have a tutorial on how to cite correctly, how you give credit to others. But in this guide, there's also a page of some tools that you can use for making your citations kind of automated. They're free tools, and there's some online guides to help you format correctly. I think I'll wrap it up there. I think I've gone on pretty long, and I don't want to take up a lot more of your time. I do hope that this guide will prove helpful, and if it's not, and you want more assistance throughout the guide, there's ways to contact me. You can call me or email me, and I'm fairly responsive and delighted to help with anything that you have questions about. Tracking down sources, how to cite things, whatever it is, please contact me. I'm here to be a support for your research.
Paula, I just wanted to say thank you for setting up this wonderful resource for our students. I was a student here at the University of Arizona a while back, and it was just always very interesting, as you go into the library and try to kind of find what's already been done, what questions have already been asked, to develop that literature search for our projects. And just remember doing that myself and not having something like a guide like this, and the fact that you've spent time to put something very specific together for our students in our program, and with particular attention to the topic that the topics that they're looking at. We just want to say thank you, because this is a very helpful guide. Students, as you come in, this is your kind of first experience, as Paula mentioned, or one of your first experiences with doing this type of research, and maybe at the university level. And I feel like as you come into the university or to a university, and you start to do your own research and start to look at these topics, you may look back and on this resource that Paula has put together, and just be very grateful for the work that she's done on it, because it is rather unique to have such a page set up for our group. So I just want to say thank you, Paula.
You're so welcome. I'm glad it's helpful.
I also want to extend my thanks. I think that I didn't realize that you were going to create this for us. And so I think that it's such a great tool. And even with one of the items I was just looking at right now, there's the free graphics and poster guide. And something that we ran into when we started doing when we started entering in science fairs, because we know how the research posters are, but sometimes the way the research posters are formatted and the requirements for the science fair, they don't necessarily meet all the time, you know? They're like, we don't want you to have any sponsors and stuff. So sometimes when we submit the student research posters, we have to cover up like any sort of affiliation. They can't have like what high school they're from. But even with that, they can't include just any old photos off of Google. You know, they either have to be original, so ones that the students have taken themselves doing their research, or they have to be something that's free and public with a citation. And so the fact that you have the rights free images right here available, that's such a great tool. I'm looking over this for myself as well. Doing stuff for my own research and thesis. So it's very comprehensive. And to the students, I think that that a lot of time has been dedicated to create this and to go over this. But just looking at some of these things, I don't think we've covered everything that's in here. And so I encourage you, as you're beginning the research process and everything, to take a look at this and explore and see, because as I said, it's something that's helpful to me outside of this, and I'm sure that this is something that's going to be helpful to you even outside of NASEP, for your homework assignments or for other things as well. So again, yes, thank you so much, Paula.
Absolutely.
And I would just say too, that for the students, again, this is really comprehensive here. And so it also could feel intimidating to jump into it and to kind of start to explore it. The great thing about this website is that you can't break it. So that's a nice thing about it. You can kind of push all the buttons, kind of go in, do some searches, and just see how it all works. But if you do need help exploring the site or getting started on the site and you're not sure exactly where to get started, I think Paula has given us a great introduction. But please know that the NASEP staff is here to kind of help you to kind of research this. It could be that as we're helping you in investigating the site, that we might come up with even other resources that we could come back to Paula to ask about, kind of putting
Yeah,
resources
please.
up on the website that we
Yeah.
come across because of your investigation and your exploring of the site and seeing what's available, and maybe what pieces may yet to be available that we could provide that would be helpful to you, but also to future NASEP students too. This is a great resource that I think can be longstanding for our program.
Yeah, please use my email address and shoot me any links or things that you're like, hey, this belongs in there. I'd like everyone to have access to this. Great idea.
So do the students have any questions, last questions, comments for Ms. Paula?
I think they're taking it all in. Can we get a thumbs up either in the chat or on your screens to show that you're good? I see some thumbs up, some thumbs
Yep. And also unmute. Let's thank Ms. Paula for her time in presenting to us and creating this wonderful resource for NASEP. So let's give her a round of applause. So if you can unmute, that would be great. And give a round of applause for her.
One.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
students. And thanks, Rudy. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you.
All right, and go ahead, Carol.
I just had a thank you that was too late, but go ahead.
So with that said, I'd like to excuse the students. So unless they have any questions or comments, then you're free to go.
One thing before everybody heads out is our next workshop will be with the American Indian alumni. And so they're going to be doing some workshops with resumes and also personal statements, which will both be very important tools as you're preparing for the college admissions process. And so we'll send out some more information on that, but we just wanted to give you a preview of what it will be on, and they're really excited. So I hope you all are too. And I think that's it. So yes, to go with what Natalia said, students, you are excused. I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.